Hello, Facebook. It's Reid Mahalko from readaboutsex.com.
And Alex S. Morgan from alexsmorgan.com.
Woohoo! Today's a very special walk. So we have to figure out, my legs are longer than yours, so we have to find the right,
We'll
we have to
find
find
a
the right
pace.
pace.
I'll do a processional. We'll figure it out.
We'll do a processional. Yeah, just kick me if I'm going too fast.
How about I just grab your ass?
So that works too. As you're signing in, let us know where you're signing in from. We are in Alameda, California right now, and it is a beautiful day. And
Right by the waterfront.
Alex and I were at the grocery store, and so now we're taking a moment to Facebook Live. I have appropriated Alex's time and attention and focus for a few moments. And you, when I was asking you what you wanted to talk about, you said you had a question from a client.
Yes.
That would be appropriate for this conversation. But first, let people know who you are and what you do.
Sure
And I'll
thing.
try to not, I gotta get the camera right because I think I was hurting you into the glass over there.
Not to worry, I would have just flown up against it like a bird and slid right down.
Like a tiny, tiny bird.
So I am a sex coach and relationship coach with a background in professional BDSM. I worked as a professional switch for just over a decade. I think I hit the 12-year mark this year. It has been an absolute blast. It has been an honor to work with people on both a one-to-many scale, doing workshops all over the country and in Canada, and on a one-to-one and one-to-two scale, working with individuals and couples all over the world via Skype and face-to-face here in the Bay Area.
Well, thank you for joining us on our little walk today, Alex. We've known each other for how many years now?
Oh goodness, I think it's been about 6 now.
It's been at least 6, I think,
Okay.
because we've known each other for a while, but I think it's been at least 6 then. Okay, so what was the question you wanted to talk about in our walk here?
Sure thing. So yesterday, a client and I were having a dialogue, and they had a really fantastic question about consent and agency and BDSM. And one of the things that they were wondering about was when you're in a 24/7 BDSM dynamic with somebody or an otherwise persistent kink dynamic where the dominant and submissive relationship is ongoing, where there's an ongoing sense of power, is there a point at which the submissive stops being able to consent, at which they stop being able to or believing that they can say no?
Okay. So just so everybody knows, I'm driving myself crazy with my selfie stick action. So we're gonna sit in the shade so that I'm not herding. I feel like a little sheepdog trying to herd you in circles or something.
Maybe that's what it is.
It
Maybe
could be
it's
that.
your inner puppy.
It's my inner collie. All right, so here we're gonna sit here. We're gonna get the bridge in the background.
Perfect.
Much better, much better. Okay, now I'm not driving myself crazy. Okay, so the question is, in a 24/7 BDSM relationship, like when, and just describe what that means because there's a lot of sex geeks who aren't necessarily kinky. So
Totally.
So what's a 24/7 relationship mean?
So 24/7 is kind of a misleading term because even in a relationship where the power dynamic goes on for outside of a scene, there are typically breaks and periods of time when somebody is off or when they're not necessarily acting from a dominant or submissive frame of mind. So even within a relationship that people refer to as a 24/7 relationship, which just means that the power dynamic aspect or the service aspect or even the kink aspect takes place not just within a tightly defined scene, but also outside of it in their everyday life. And that can be really beautiful and subtle. That can look like bringing your dominant breakfast in bed. It can look like making sure that your submissive is rewarded for taking self-care that they really need to do. It can be this really beautiful and romantic thing. And it can also be really filthy and kinky and lovely.
And for those of you, I'll put my nerdy twist on it, which might ruin the whole thing.
Oh, I doubt it.
So I'm thinking, I'm like, ooh, like what's an example in non-kinky life of something that's 24/7, right? So when somebody who's a mother or parents, right, or a father, like, when you're a parent and you're at home with your kids, you are a parent 24/7, and we could say that a parent never actually stops being a parent 24/7. However, when you drop the kids off at grandma and grandpa's or summer camp or whatever, not Sex Geek summer camp, by the way. No children at Sex Geek summer camp. But when you drop them off at school, while you are still a parent, you have a reprieve.
Yes.
So some people in their kink life are having this dynamic of whatever the kink situation is, being there 24/7, but there are times when they're taking a break.
Yeah.
Okay. And so around consent, then, how does that work in? Because where was your client asking from the position of, if this is my top and I'm their submissive and we're in a 24/7 relationship, have I just given over my consensual agency?
They were actually asking from the other point of view, and this is part of why I love my clients so much. This is somebody who is more dominantly inclined and who was deeply concerned that they would only be playing with somebody who was able to give full and informed consent.
And
they'd been reading a lot of research that said basically that if somebody believes that they can't say no, that it is abuse, and that was pretty unambiguous.
Oh, wow.
And that I told them that basically that yes, I do believe that holds true even within kink relationships, but that there is a big difference between somebody, whether they're in a kinky relationship or otherwise, who believes that they can't say no matter what is happening, whether they're getting flogged or whether they're being told to go to the grocery store, and somebody who is secure in the fact that they can say no, whether they're being told to go to the grocery store or being told to take a larger butt plug.
Got it. Now I'm thinking about butt plugs, and we just went to the grocery store
Without butt plugs.
Without butt plugs, that we know of. Yes. I mean, I think I would know if I had a butt plug in. Maybe not. So that's interesting. So the study was saying if somebody thinks they can't say no, then they don't have agency from their perspective. Even if I was encouraging somebody and telling them over and over again they can say no.
Yes, and that brings me to the next piece, which is that my answer to them was basically, it really comes down to making sure that you're really clear as a dominant that anybody that you play with, even when they're in subspace, that they can say no, that they can, that's encouraged, that they should absolutely let you know what's going on for them, that safe wording is not disappointing you, that in fact it's doing exactly what you want them to do, which is keep you constantly informed of their internal state.
Like being able to reward, like even setting up reward systems for saying no, like we do with cuddle parties, or similarly, which is like when people say no, and even at my play parties, we try to teach and encourage people to, when somebody says no to you, to thank them for taking care of themselves, or whatever phrase works for you, because some people think that phrase, like, thank you for taking care of yourself, sounds demeaning. So, but whatever the phrase is that works for you, that encourages people and lets them know that them saying no, or in this instance, them safe wording out, is actually a good thing. Like, you reward that behavior because it helps encourage future behaviors like that, where you want people to be able to speak up.
Absolutely. What I do with my own submissives is I specifically thank them for whichever piece of that was hard for them. If it's speaking up about their needs is hard for them, I thank them for doing that. If the courage to come to somebody who has a power dynamic with them is hard for them, I thank them for their courage. Whichever piece of that is the most challenging for them is the piece that I thank them for.
If any of this is resonating for you or seems helpful, hit some emoticons. Because we're in that interesting place where you seem really quiet out there, and I just want to make sure, one, that you can hear us, but two, that this is interesting, at least, because is this our first Facebook Live together?
Yeah.
Ooh, our first. You're watching.
Hi, Katrina.
You're watching our Facebook Live cherry.
Oh, there they go.
There we go. Look at it's raining emoticons. Okay, now I feel better. Thank you for handling my insecurities around what we're doing.
They like us.
They like us. They really like us. So what kind of tips do you have for people who are DOMs, for people who are subs, for people who switch back and forth? Like what kind of, or even just people who don't know what they are yet, who want to explore this? Like what kind of tips for being able to encourage consent consent, I guess, agency check-ins? Like, what, I don't, is there a word or a phrase for that kind of a thing?
There should be. One thing that I really like about that is that what you're doing is you're looking not only to make sure that the person knows that they still have access to their agency, you're looking to make sure that there's somebody who, even in a neutral situation, has access to their own sense of agency within themselves, which is a piece which is also separate from BDSM. And so one of the things that I really recommend doing is, if you are a dominant, if you're a switch, if you're looking to play with somebody, anybody, even if it's not a kink situation, look to see how they are with their boundaries. Is this somebody who is comfortable saying no when it comes to their personal space? Is this somebody who is comfortable saying no and speaking up about their boundaries and their physical needs? Is this somebody who's comfortable saying no to somebody who is in a position of authority with them? And all of these criteria are going to make for somebody who is able to assert their boundaries during a kink scene. So these are all the green lights that you're going to be looking for finding a play partner who is able to access their agency in the heat of the moment.
And this is where, for me, also me not identifying as kinky in the realms where I have friends who are kinky in all capital letters, the idea of assessment, like being able to have these conversations, because some people, they're like, Reid, God, you just talk and talk and talk. Like, can we get to the sex? And I'm like, well, yes, we can get to the sex eventually, but I want to have this conversation because I'm trying to assess where somebody's skill sets are and where their weak areas are. And I'm also trying to share where I think my weak areas are and where my strengths are, because if we're gonna play and I don't get a chance to properly assess, I don't know if I can count on somebody to change their mind, or if, for example, like, let's say we're fucking and I'm the one who's doing the penetration and they change their mind, it can be tricky to speak up in the moment because you want your partner or your play partner to have their fun and finish or complete the thing or whatever. And the reason I know that that's tricky is when I'm being penetrated, it's hard for me to always speak up right away in the moment. And then there are sometimes when I don't know what I need. And so I'm not sure if I should call a timeout or if I should stick with what we're doing, because then maybe I'll get clarity. So if it's difficult for me to speak up in the moment and I don't know you real well yet, it sounds really sticky, no pun intended, or maybe pun intended. It's really sticky for me to just assume you're going to be great at speaking up in the moment no matter what's happening. And then there's subspace and these other areas that I think make things even more tricky.
Absolutely. Subspace, it's basically BDSM lingo for the altered state, the endorphin rush that comes along with being in a submissive or masochistic headspace. Basically, what happens is all of your endorphins start to release through a combination of endorphins from any pain you might be experiencing or pleasure you might be experiencing, and from the trance-like state that people will often go into when they are in a deeply submissive headspace with somebody that they trust. It's not something that everybody experiences right away. It's not something that everybody feels comfortable going into with new partners or even at all. So if you don't experience this, you're not broken, and it doesn't mean that you won't ever experience this also.
And that's where it also becomes interesting, because there have been situations where I knew I was a yes going into it, but then like the next day I'm kind of like, how do I feel about what happened? And now we go down the rabbit hole of, like, if you want to get really geeky and nuanced, like the conversation about consent and, like, not even regrettable sex, but just like I'm thinking more deeply about the thing the next day because I'm processing it.
Yeah.
And what does that mean about what actually happened in the moment? And maybe another time we'll do a longer, another talk about those kinds of situations, which again, for me, is get to know people and assess where everyone's at. Even if you're having casual hookups, spend,
Especially if you're having casual
especially if you're
hookups.
having casual hookups. I mean, it's kind of like, what's the quote about if I had 5 hours to chop down a tree, I'd spend 4 hours sharpening the axe. So if I had 5 hours to have sex, I'd probably spend 4 hours having conversation and cuddling,
It makes
and
the
getting to
sex
know each
better.
other. Yeah, well, I can only last a few minutes. So, if I can shorten it up, then I lose my odds. Thank you for laughing at my bad jokes. Leave your questions and comments, what you
Please.
thought about today's video. Where can people find you, Alex?
AlexSMorgan.com.
AlexXMorgan.com, and then you guys know where I am. If you're coming to camp, camp's coming up real quick. We're under 60 days till camp, 57 or something like that. So go to readaboutsexx.com/camp FAQ if you're interested in coming to camp, and AlexXMorgan.com for Alex's stuff. Share this video if you think it was interesting, and hit some emoticons on the way out. Alex S. Morgan, thank you for coming on our little walk and for sitting under the trees. Under the trees by the bridge with me today. Bye, everyone. We'll see you tomorrow.
Bye.
Thanks,
Go
Alex.
to camp. You will love it.
Aw, you're the best. Bye.
Bye.